everybody. Can you hear me? Good. Just before I start, I just love, because we're going to be talking about customized employment, and I'd like to sort of figure out what people know and what they don't. Can I just, by a show of hands, how many people here are very familiar with customized employment? Okay. How many people are a little bit familiar with customized employment? And how many people are not familiar at all with customized employment? Great. Okay. So because there are people who are not familiar at all, I am going to, as part of this, really do kind of an overview of customized employment. But for those who know a little bit and those who know a lot, what I'm going to do as I talk about our journey is really focus on not only the techniques that we've used for customized employment, but kind of how we as an agency use those techniques and made it part of our work and made it operational and effective. So hopefully this will be something that will work for everybody. So I just want to tell you first sort of what I'm hoping to offer you here, or what my hope is that you'll get out of this is, one, whether you're a provider who's doing work with in employment, or a provider who's interested in making sure that people that you're working with get employment, or whether you're an individual who themselves is looking for employment, or a family member who's supporting someone to think about their career, I'm hoping that our success and outcomes will inspire and encourage you. So that's one of the things that I hope to accomplish. I'm also want to give you an overview of customized employment and how it can work, and how we could, and then I'm also very primarily hoping to give you a sense of how customized employment can be an effective and very practical tool for helping a lot of people find good job matches. And then finally, what I'd like to do is spend a little bit of time talking about bringing customized employment into the world of students transitioning from high school, or in some cases, students transitioning from college experiences as well. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to do, and tell you a little bit more about myself. In addition to sort of having started the field as a lawyer and finding out that the last thing I wanted to do was go into a courtroom and talk to judges, much prefer to be talking to all of you. I've always been interested in policy relating to mental health issues in particular, but sometime around the time when I was making a transition from being a lawyer, I also found out that my older son had an autism spectrum disability. So I come to this work with a real passion, not only from my own interest, in kind of making things work and problem solving, but from a real commitment to working with people with disabilities who, I believe in. So that's just to give you a little bit of background on that. In talking about my agency, so the agency that I've worked for I don't know, it's about 15, 18 years now, where I started working very part-time and built my way up to being chief operating officer. It's a fairly small agency in New York City, and I want to give you the background of our history because it really helps to show why it is that we found that we needed customized employment and why it was so useful for us. So JobPath started in a way that is actually very different from a lot of the provider agencies around the country. A lot of provider agencies started along with parents as part of parents' ways of providing safety, security, and a good life for their children or their adult children. Our agency actually started as a part of a little sort of a think tank in New York City called the Vera Institute of Justice. And the aim of the Vera Institute of Justice was to kind of push the envelope and innovate, particularly in the criminal justice system. So you say, well, why did this agency working with people with disabilities come out of that? The Vera Institute of Justice worked with government to solve problems, and they had been experimenting with supported employment techniques for ex-offenders and drug abusers. And when New York State was in the process of deinstitutionalizing people from the Willowbrook institution, which got notoriety around the country for how bad the conditions were, the Vera Institute of Justice, through our project, worked with the government to say, let's see whether people with disabilities can work. And that was a long, long time ago, before supported employment existed, and before there was funding for supported employment, for long-term supports for people. And so we started working really with people who could, once they got a job, they could handle the job without support. And we started using funding that was geared that way. And we had over time, we had a large city grant and large federal grants that really pressured us to find jobs for people pretty quickly and to find jobs for people who didn't need a lot of support. And it was at a time when we had industries in New York that we could work with who could actually manage to provide natural supports because of the kind of jobs that people were getting. There was a lot of, at that time there were many clerical jobs, many routine clerical tasks. There were mailroom jobs. There were maintenance jobs that were really quite basic. They were not using a lot of, maintenance jobs that were not using a lot of technology. So we, for many years, were doing really quite well with that model. And then a couple of things happened. And a couple things happened that kind of put us into that mode. One of the things that happened was that in the 1990s, there was a lot of funding that began to be available for working with people with more disabilities. And we had always focused on one-to-one placements. A lot of the other agencies in our area had done enclaves and group placements where they had mobile crews going out. We were doing one-to-one, and we were very committed to that, and we were really excited by the idea that we could find placements for people with more significant disabilities who needed long-term support. So we were excited about that, and also all of the waiver programs through Medicaid came in, and we began to, we're able to create some individualized day programs for people with pretty significant disabilities. And because we were the innovators in the field, we were really lucky because we got a really good funding to be able to actually match people one-on-one with support workers who would go in and help them develop activities in the community, in the non-employment world. So this was a great opportunity. And what happened, though, through the 1990s is that our day program providing individual services was doing great, and we were really struggling with our supported employment program, finding people jobs. So here we were, we had this mission, we really wanted to do it, and we were doing a pretty lousy job with it. And that put us in that situation. So this is where we were and what our programs looked like 12 years ago. We had a standard train-in-place model with people with less significant disabilities, and we were just kind of moving people through as quickly as possible using wonderful, good VR funding and our city grant and our federal grant. We had an individualized day program serving people, so we were doing some really interesting things with them, but they weren't in employment. We had one person in all of those day services that had a job, and he had a job because his mother helped him find that job. So that wasn't very encouraging. Then we had a struggling support employment program. We had found some jobs for people, but it was really sort of a matter of luck, and we were having a lot of employers saying, the person that you need this person to do all of these tasks, and even we did a little bit of job carving here and there so we could find some jobs for people. And so by the time I got involved with our customized support employment program in around 2003, I think we had about 14 people who were getting long-term supports on jobs. But we did have that commitment to finding employment for people. So the passion was there. Couple of other things that was happening is we were having more and more people, even in our non-supported employment program, people with dual diagnoses. And part of it was because we were doing individualized placement and so many other agencies were doing enclave work. Our VR counselors were sending us, even for that program, people who were a little bit more complicated, and we were having trouble because of some of the behavioral issues. We were having more and more trouble. We'd find them jobs, and they would end up back through the revolving door. And then, does it sound like this like long list of sorrows here? Sorry to be depressing, but it does get better. Then there were lots of changes in the economy that also made it increasingly difficult to find traditional jobs, even in our regular program. And that was, New York City became a very retail economy. The clerical jobs didn't exist anymore with computerization. The mailroom jobs were all outsourced, and they were minimizing it. And that got even worse, like in the last 7 years, it's gotten even worse because there's no deliveries anymore, and people are doing much more by email. So we had this revolving door as well because we weren't finding people good jobs, even in our traditional program that was just our train in place with people with more significant disabilities. And then, and I can say this because I'm a family member too, we were having trouble because our families and our job developers weren't on the same page. And we were working with individuals, and then we'd find them a job, and the last minute, a family member would say, that's not gonna work for my son or daughter. And then usually the son or daughter would listen to their very wise family member, and we'd put in all that work, and the job was gone. So we needed to find a solution. Luckily, we had a wonderful relationship with, has anyone here heard of Beth Mount? So Beth Mount is one of the gurus of person-centered planning. She started out in Georgia. She had taught us in our individualized day program how to do some really careful person-centered planning with people to help them do wonderful things with their life. And she introduced us to Mark Gold and Associates and to Mike Callahan, who was one of the people who created customized employment. And we brought him in, and he did some training with us, taught us about what customized employment was, and we really felt that was a solution for us, and I'll explain why we did. So just very quickly, for people who know nothing about what customizing job is customizing is a process where you get to know the person very, very well, not through standard assessments, but in their own life, so that you really get to see them at their best. And then you work as well with families, and you talk to the people who know them the best. And then work with employers very individually, not to look at job titles and descriptions anymore, but to really work with employers to see some of their unmet needs, things they really need, unbundle tasks, and really try to see which of those tasks can fit together with what you've learned about the person. The reason this felt so right to us when we heard it, and it was like light bulbs going off, and I can say that, but it wasn't my light bulbs because I've only heard about this from our executive director because she's the one who started it. I was working very part-time and spending a lot of time with my son with autism at home, but at the time we first learned about it, it was light bulbs going off. It's like, maybe this can work. And just as an aside, we'd really tried a lot of things with supported employment, and I think the thing that was most discouraging for us is that we did a special project for working with people with traumatic brain injuries, and we didn't find one person a job, and that was I think we actually found one person a job. So what customization did for us, and what this particular process that I'm going to describe did for us, is that it provided a structured process for getting to know people. So it wasn't as if what we had been always doing is we got to know people in some way. We asked them questions, but we didn't feel like we had a real good way of doing it systematically, so we felt like we really were learning what we needed to know. And then we really liked that it was focusing on matching those skills and contributions with employers' unmet needs, because we knew that the biggest problem we were having is that the job descriptions out there that we were applying for just weren't matching the people we were working with. And again, here we are focusing only on our supported employment program with the people with the most significant disabilities at this point. We knew that there were some problems with our other program, but we were doing okay with that. So we're really just focusing on this small supported employment program. What was clear from our talks with Mike Callahan at Mark Gold and Associates was that it was also going to take into account the conditions that people had. And so all the issues we had about people only being able to work a small number of hours, people who had a lot of anxiety, people who had attendance problems, people who were late, all of those people who had some significant physical issues, all of those things were things that instead of us looking at them as obstacles, we began to look at them, be able to say through this process, we're going to look at them as conditions, and we're going to try to tailor a job that meets those conditions. And I think this was really important, was ensuring that everyone's on the same page. And what we'll see as we talk more about customized employment is that there's not only a planning process, but the planning process ends in a employment meeting that really gets everyone on the same page. And we were really troubled with that, about the fact that people weren't on the same page, because a lot of jobs didn't happen because of that. So skipping over all of the work that we did to get there, just to kind of get to be a little less discouraging about where we were, because we're very happy with where we are now, this is what our program looks like now. Right now, we're using customized employment strategies for all our participants, even though those customized employment strategies are generally suggested to be used for people with the most significant disabilities. In our market, in our economy, we felt like it was something, eventually we came to the realization that it was really good for everyone we worked with. And that doesn't mean that every job is done that way, because sometimes we'll start customizing and we'll find like a really good job match that's a regular job, but it seemed like a good approach for everyone. We're a pretty small agency, we're placing about 40 to 50 people consistently per year, and those jobs are lasting. There's no revolving door. And I did the statistic for this, I had never done the statistic before, about 65 to 70% of the people who we provide supports are now working. And so when I talk about the people we're working with, I'm talking about people in our employment program, people who are in our day services program, people who are in our Medicaid service coordination, who are just getting coordination from us, and people in our small residential program. So that's a big difference from the one person who had a job before that. And now, more recently, as more funding and possibilities are coming in for people coming out of school or still in school, we've been able to begin to use some foundation grants and some government funding to do customized internships for students in high school or people who've recently graduated from high school. And that's become really exciting, and that's a new part of what we're doing. To kind of put more of a personal face on what people's lives are like now. So this is Jack, and I'm going to first talk about people who are in our day services program. We still have a significant number of people in our day services program who do not have jobs. It's probably about 50%, but there's a good reason for that. Some of it is their choice. We have a lot of new people in our program. We're doing one whole section of our program is we're working with people with autism spectrum disabilities who are in college, and we're providing college support. So those are people who may be concentrating for the first couple of years on just, getting used to college, and then we'll phase in employment. So that does affect the results somewhat. So Jack was somebody who was in that Willowbrook institution that was deinstitutionalized many years ago. He lived in some large group homes for a while, and then ended up, more recently, he's in his own apartment shared with another person with disabilities and support from another agency. He was in our day program for a long time. Again, it's an individualized program, so he's out in the community. And what we did when we started working with Jack is that our employment staff worked very, very closely with the support workers who were working with him in our day program. And what the coordinators and staff in our day program had helped Jack develop. Jack loves animals, but he loves animals in a very specific way. He really, really likes cats, and he has has an amazing ability to domesticate feral cats. And he has no use of his limbs, but all you have to do is place a cat under his chin, and he does magic with that feral cat. And so as part of our day program, with support worker help, he had been spending time working for a pet store that had a not-for-profit component of domesticating feral cats and then creating adoptions for them. He started doing that as a volunteer job and did a really nice job with it, but it wasn't until our employment specialist came in and did discovery and found out not only what he was doing for the store, but what else he could do for the store, what other tasks he could do. We created or helped him create an employment opportunity there. And then even once he was there, we continued to work with him to develop some more tasks. So what he's doing at the store is he is domesticating these feral cats. What we added to it that was really helpful to the employer was that he learns all the information about the cats that they're trying to get adopted. And when people come in, he can tell them all about the cats. And because he's so passionate about it, he's very effective in getting those adoptions to happen. And he's also doing some fundraising outside the store. And that he's not the only one who's doing it, but he's one of the people who does fundraising outside the store for the not-for-profit portion. So this is, Jack, it's not a job with a lot of hours at this point, and he wants other things. He's very interested in recycling. So the next thing we'll be doing is working with him on trying to use that interest in recycling. I don't think he wants to do, he doesn't want to recycle bottles. He wants to do something involving policy and recycling. So that's Jack. Ruben also was part of our day services program, and he had been volunteering for many years as part of our program, one-on-one, with the school, the Jewish Guild for the Blind, where he had actually gone to school. And we had tried for many, many years to make that into a real job. They just didn't have the money. They weren't going to do it. We initially customized a job for him actually at a Barnes & Noble's that was in his community. And the way that was customized is that they had a music store. He was very interested they had a music section. He was very interested in music, so we learned through discovery and through working with his day staff that interest in music. He had some good fine motor skills that could be used to work to process some of the CDs that were discarded. He has a really good ear, so he was able to actually put these CDs into a machine that made a clicking sound, and he could hear, and it clicked. I don't know all the details about this, but it clicked if it needed to get discarded, and didn't click if it didn't. So we were able to use all those things. And one of the other things in discovery is that we learned how much time he spent in that Barnes & Noble anyway, and they knew him. We created that job. That job lasted for quite a few years, and then they got rid of their music department. Then we went back. And we've created another job for him. He works at a child care center with children, mostly children without disabilities. They don't have the money for a full music program. He had done the volunteer work that he did at the Jewish Guild for the Blind, had been playing musical instruments and singing with children, and that's what he does at this child care center. So that's just like a really, really nice match for him. And the children really love him, and it also gives them exposure to somebody with disability, which is something that the child care center and the parents are really happy about. Lamar is, I'm just keeping an eye on the time. Lamar is somebody who he's very smiley in this picture, but he actually is a very serious, very not communicative person. Unless he gets to know you very well. Obviously here he's very happy and comfortable. He also had been doing volunteer data entry skill. Again, we worked with his day staff. We learned about what he was doing. We learned a lot about what neighborhood he needed to be in based on his travel abilities. And he's now working for a not-for-profit that in our area that provides information for parents. It's a parent resource center, and they had an unmet need there of the data entry of parent surveys. Just they weren't keeping up with it. So this was an unmet need they had, and something that we knew from our discovery with him that he could do. So it was really matching that unmet need with what we knew his abilities were. We've also, of course, worked with a lot of people who come to us through our VR agency, who are not a part of our day program. Obviously, discovery with those people is more extensive. It's a full discovery process where we talk to the individuals, we talk to the families, we spend time in their home and neighborhoods, and we'll talk about that more. Geneva, we learned by spending time with her in her home that she was like amazing, and Amy's heard the story already, but she was amazingly good at folding clothes. I always say, like, I need somebody like her in my house because I'm amazingly bad at folding clothes. But she's really, really good at it. And actually, when they started going with her in the community, they found that if she was at a store and things were unfolded, she'd start folding them. We have a wonderful young employment specialist who spent a lot of time just going to stores all around the neighborhoods which were close, a walking distance from her home, found an unmet need with a Foot Locker store where there were a lot of tourists who were just ripping through clothes, and the staff were staying late and coming in early to fold those clothes. And then there was also the things that were shipped in that needed to get refolded. And they created a job for her. She's been there. She's been there for, I don't think, 8 years now. They've made sure. Initially, she was actually on the floor with the other. On the floor, and because people wanted her to be integrated, that made her very anxious, so we kind of recustomized the job. She's now downstairs, but the staff are in and out all the time, and the rest of the time she's not in any day program. She works about 4 or 5 hours a day, and the rest of the 3 or 4 days a week, the rest of the time she just spends a lot of time shopping in her community. Jarrell was a young man who we were able to find an unmet need at a grammar school that worked with people with special needs. They wanted to create a healthy snack program. Jarrell, we learned through discovery, was really good had a lot of experience with children from family members, so we would never have found that out if we'd asked him, what do you want to do? We found he had a lot of experience with children. We knew that he had competencies and abilities in shopping, in preparing food, and so he is helping, and not only helping, but sort of making their healthy snack program work. He goes and shops for healthy snacks. He prepares the snacks with the high school interns, and so they get a model, and this is one of the things the school really wanted, is for the high school students to get a model of somebody who had a disability, who was young like them, working. And he also does, sets up the cafeteria and washes dishes. So they bundled all those tasks as part of this need that wasn't there before. And finally, Hugo. Hugo would have been someone who ordinarily would have been in our more traditional program. He doesn't need a lot of support. This is an example of somebody who we eventually, someone who, as we extended customized employment, he had a very strong interest. He wanted to be a security guard. He didn't have the certifications to do it. He didn't have the financial wherewithal to get that. And he is now working at the security desk of a private high school in our area. He's monitoring the students during high traffic times. It's made a huge difference for the school in terms of being able to keep tabs on the students. He will keep track of students who are wandering the halls as well, and he does some light maintenance tasks. So again, there was an unmet need. We learned a lot about him. We knew not only his interests, but what he could do. We found out that he had mechanical and maintenance tasks that he could do, and we bundled it together into that. So that's just kind of where we are now. What I do want to say is that we just kind of give you the trajectory. After we started using customized employment, we started small, and I'll talk about that a little bit later after I do the overview. We started small. We got to the point where our supported employment program was working really well. We were generating through our supported employment program, we were generating about 17 jobs per year, and we only had about 25 people coming in, 25, 30 people coming per year, so that was pretty good. And so we had a solid, full-scale supported employment program, and then we had this other program that was serving like about 80 people a year. And we almost Our executive director likes to say that without knowing it, we ended up doing our own little experiment. Because after 5 or 6 years after doing customized employment, with the people who had the most significant disabilities, when we compared our results with our customized supported employment and our program that was working with people who had supposedly less challenges, the results we were getting with our customized employment program was a lot better. So when we figured that out, it was pretty much a no-brainer. The only problem was that we had a funding mechanism. As you remember when I started talking, we had a funding mechanism that was really encouraging us to move people through quickly. So we had to kind of start working with our funders and start saying, even though we can maximize our funding this way, if we're not getting the results we need, we got to find a way to make customized employment work with whatever funding we have. And so we are at the point now where no matter what funding that we have, we are using customized employment. That doesn't mean that I think that customized employment is the answer and the be-all to everything. There are people who regular job development works really, really well for, and even as we're doing customized employment, we will sometimes do that because we will find something that's just a regular job that's really good for people. But what customized employment does is allows us that flexibility. So I'm going to just stop for a minute and just any questions. I mean, any questions that don't have to do with what the process is, because I haven't talked about the process yet. But any questions so far about the experience I described? Yeah.
I had a question about you mentioned that there was disconnect with families. I'm wondering if you found it more that the jobs that you were kind of thinking about placing someone in didn't match maybe their expectations, or were there more general concerns about work and stamina and income versus benefits?
I think it was, it wasn't really the match because I think people were at that point nobody really knew that matching was so important. People just wanted jobs. It was more secure, it was like safety concerns. The person would tell us, oh, I don't care where my job is, and the family member would say, yeah, we do care where the job is. That's a long distance to commute. There were benefits issues. Somebody would say, yeah, I want a full-time job, or they might say we want a part-time job, but then we'd find something that had to be a fuller-time job, and they'd say yes, and then the family member would say no. So it was more around those kinds of logistical and more just safety issues, sort of more. And sometimes we'd have someone who came to us who said they wanted a job, and their family member didn't want them to work at all, and we wouldn't even find it out. Because we weren't really getting to know the families as well. That doesn't mean it was never the job match, because every once in a while it was. Somebody would come to us from the VR agency with a goal for maintenance that they had kind of created. We would put them through, in this train and place program, we'd have these situational assessments. They would do some kind of maintenance work in a nice little not-for-profit somewhere. And then the family we'd get them a porter maintenance job, and the family would say, I don't want my son doing maintenance work. So every once in a while it was something like that. Any other questions before I move on? Yeah.
Most of them any stories that you can share with us that are with new diagnosis more involved in the business?
I mean, we certainly have we've worked with a lot of people with dual diagnosis, with a lot of anxiety issues. We don't work with people with intense psychiatric issues. Those are going to be going to a MH agency, which we don't work with. We have worked with a lot of people with pretty significant autism spectrum. I don't have a particular story. I think the complexity of the people we have with physical disabilities were hard ones to do. I'll try to think of some to give you. I would say that we are still not getting jobs for people who have, very, very significant, combination of very significant behavioral and cognitive issues, or very, very significant physical issues. And I think that's just, some of it's luck, and some of it is, it's hard, it's hard work. It takes a lot of time. Mm-hmm.
I'm from Tennessee School for the Deaf, and we try to set up supported employment opportunities for a lot of our students. and deafness is not their primary disability. We actually have a student with pretty severe autism, but they don't look at the autism as much as how am I going to communicate. I was just wondering if you have any stories of your students not communicating very well. Is there any ways that you can help with that?
I think that what we've done, when there's communication issues, we're really sort of relying on technology. And the other thing that we're relying, so we then will bring in what we call our CBVH agency to work with us on the technology for the communication part. The other thing is that sometimes we're in a situation where when we're focusing on multiple disabilities like that, it may be that the person can do the tasks, but there's still support issues. And we are then tailoring jobs that are smaller in hours so that there can be support staff there, particularly if we're not able to access long-term the technology. So that's, the answer is then we do a combination of customizing and supported employment. And a lot of that depends on what the funding is that's available in your state, right? And so we've had to limit the hours. We've now actually, our funding system from our DD system has gone to an hourly funding, and as a result of that, we've been able to negotiate more hours for some people. Anything? Yeah.
Do you have any sort of personality testing that you can do for folks to see what kind of job would be best suited for them if they don't know what it is they exactly want to do?
Yeah, we don't do that because the process, and we'll describe it in a minute, the process of discovery brings that out through the natural part of observing their life. And so we don't do that. That doesn't mean we don't have anyone on our staff who couldn't do that, but it really comes from looking at their life. And it works really just as well, if not better. Thankfully, you didn't ask about the personality testing that employers do, but that's a whole other subject. Okay, I'm going to move on. So just to sort of for those of people who are not familiar with customized employment, I'm going to kind of breeze through an overview. This is not a training in customized employment. There's just too many ins and outs of it. But I am really a firm believer that if you got this overview and you went to the website that I'll give you for customized employment and you use those tools, you can do it. You don't really, that should be a terrible thing to say for all the consultants who do training, but I really do believe that this is not rocket science. And so my hope is that this overview will motivate you to say, even if to go to a full training, or to say, I can make this happen myself. And it's something you can do programmatically if you're a provider. If you're a family member, you can use this with an individual who you care about. If you're an individual, you can do it yourself. My job is a customized job. And if you're an individual who needs some help in doing that, you can pull together a circle of support to help you do it. So who benefits from customized employment? Just very quickly, customized employment is very good for people with limited or no work history, people who've had past work experiences that are negative or poor matches, a difficulty fitting into a standardized job description because of the nature of their disabilities, or difficulties with the traditional application process. And this sort of goes directly to these two questions about people who have really complex issues. It is not a magic bullet. You still need, matching and customizing with employers is going to maximize the chance that you're going to find those jobs, because you're going to be looking for specific tasks and specific needs and not expecting people to do everything. But it is going to be, and certainly looking at the conditions of what kind of environment people need is really going to help, but it's still going to be hard work. The other benefit for customized employment is what I mentioned, that as the economy changes, the ability to match, to work with employers, to unbundle tasks and rebundle them, allows us to have much more ability to get in there and find jobs for people, especially when we're becoming a much more retail-oriented society everywhere. Customized employment is individualizing the employment relationship between employees and employers. So you're not starting with a job description, you're starting with the individual, and you're working and networking with employers to find the tasks that the person can do and the environment that they can do. So it's based on a very individual determination, which we call a discovery process. It's very different from a labor market job development approach, because in a labor market job development approach, we're looking at what the express need of an employer that he's already figured out is, which is in the form almost always of a job description, and we're just deciding whether our people are qualified to meet those needs. And that's why it didn't work for us, right? Because we were finding that a lot of people were not qualified for what the description was. And even with job carving is sort of in between labor market job development and customized job development. But with job carving, you're still starting with a set job description, and the more issues and challenges the person you're working with has, the less likely you are to be able to carve out particular things. Customized job development starts with the individual. It finds out the strengths, needs, and interests of that person, and then it really negotiates with the employer to match them with a job. And the reason the negotiation works when it works is because employers out there have lots of needs, and they may not have been able to figure out that needs to go into a job description, or it may be that they can't match it with anything, or there's a need, there are jobs that somebody else is doing that's overloading them, that's keeping them from being more efficient. And when you go into an employer, and you say, I have this to offer, a negotiation begins. The process we used, there are about 3 or 4 different processes for customized employment. The process we've used is Mark Gold and Associates. They have a website. The wonderful thing about Mark Gold and Associates is that even though they do charge for their technical assistance and training, they are really, really generous with their materials, and you can go and download any materials, and they have all kinds of descriptions of the process. It's a really, really wonderful site to go to. And there are other processes. I like this one in particular, and I've learned since about lots of other ones. The reason I like this process in particular is I think it's the most structured of the processes. It revolves around ending up with a planning meeting, which I think is really, really important. And I think that the profile they've created really focuses people on conditions and on tasks, which I think is the most important in getting people good jobs. The steps in customized employment are, and I'm just going to kind of go quickly through the steps just to sort of give you a sense of the flow. You do a recruitment and an intake where you explain the process. We do discovery, which is about 24 to 30 hours spread over about 6 to 8 weeks with the person. And the reason we spread it out is because you're setting up different kinds of appointments. So it's a discovery process designed to see the person at their best. We captured the discovery through a profile, so it's all written so that both the person who's doing the discovery and the team of people who are working on job development, sometimes it's the same person, sometimes it's someone else, really has all the information they need to negotiate with employers. We have a planning meeting where everybody gets on the same page. So you've got the individual who's looking for the job, the circle of people who they think are going to be most helpful in understanding what their needs are and what their interests and tasks they can do are. Very often, we hope that there'll be a VR counselor there if that's the funding source, and everybody comes, and family, and everyone comes together. And the facilitator who's done the discovery helps bring out the information that are going to help people see what's our plan, and we'll talk a little more about that. Then there's usually an agency portfolio that describes customized employment in general to employers. For many years we did it without that, we did it really successfully without having an agency portfolio, but it's a nice thing to have. Visual resumes, so we put together pictures and text that really present the individual to the employer, and that's like a really wonderful part of customized employment because a lot of people don't have a lot of work experience, but they have a lot of things they can do. And a visual resume is a really good way to show that to people. And then we go into job development, and there are various steps and parts of that, which again we're going to probably too briefly talk about. And then there's supports. So what discovery is, and this is like the centerpiece of customized employment. If you don't do discovery, you can't really do a good customizing of jobs because you don't know the person at their best. So discovery is a very non-traditional, common sense way of finding out about people's strengths, needs, and interests, and their personality, right? So to your question about the personality, you're gonna find out all of those things by seeing people in their normal life. And as we go through the process of discovery a little bit, I think you'll see how it comes out. You know, somebody like Jack, like through discovery, you know, we found out like what even though what he'd been doing is domesticating cats, one of the things that came out in discovery is what a people person he was and how much he wanted to be around people. So those are the things, and how well he was going to do with customers. But we found that out by seeing him in that setting. So it's a profile of who the person is, but only for employment. And the reason I'm emphasizing this is when we first started doing this, our customized employment pilot, and I actually, it was actually the first management job I had at JobPath. I had been doing a lot of fun, like foundation proposals and planning with our executive director. And as I had some more time, I started managing. And when I first came on, we had these 2 young employment specialists supposedly doing customized employment. And they had discovery, and it was going on and on and on because they were trying to find out everything they could about the person. That's not what we're doing here. We're targeting employment. And we're done, and that's why the profile and being guided by the profile that gears to employment is the best way of sort of making sure that you're getting the kind of information you need and that you're not letting it go on and forever. For anyone to get to know me, it would take years. So the analogy that we like to use is that discovery is like getting below the tip of the iceberg. You're trying to find out not what somebody says, the kind of job they say they want to do. I want to do a maintenance job. I want to do, a clerical job. You're going below that, and you're finding out about interests and tasks that they can do and things you might never have known about them. So if you look at yourself, there's a lot of things that you know about yourself that are part of your daily life that somebody might not know. So for me, the fact that I'm a parent of a child with autism is a very, very important piece of what I have to offer that might not be on my resume. For somebody who has an interest in animals, that might be something that doesn't come out at all as part of the process, as part of just a regular situational assessment. Somebody might be the person in their house who takes care of plants. We have a young man who, after we did discovery in his home, found that he made smoothies for everyone in his family. And we found out all the things that went into his making those smoothies, and the fact that all of a sudden there was this interest in food preparation and in particular kinds of ways that we didn't know. So there's a lot below the surface that we need to know. And then there's a lot below the surface about conditions. If someone comes to your office late every single time, you want to find out what's below the iceberg about that. It may be that they're going to sleep at 1 o'clock in the morning, and that's not going to change. And then you sort of say, what kind of job am I going to find them? I should find them a job that starts at 3 o'clock in the afternoon instead, rather than deciding this is a person who doesn't care. So there's just a lot beneath the surface. The process for discovery is again, what I like about it is that it's so structured. It's not a matter of even though, as I said, when I first came on, it was really unstructured, but the structure's there if you follow it and you have a good manager to help people follow it. So there's a home visit. where you're not there to sort of evaluate the person. This is a very non-evaluative process. There's a home visit where you're really seeing what the person does day to day. Not do they use a computer, but how do they use the computer? Are they ordering things on the computer? Are there particular tasks that they do for their family? Are they the person who takes care of some young nephew? All these things that you're going to find out from the home. You're going to get to know their community, so you get to know what the possibilities are in their community. Because a lot of people we work with have travel limitations. So you're going to kind of get to know the community. You're going to work with them to explore the current activities they do outside their home. We like to create some novel activities towards the end of the process, at least one novel activity, so we get to see how people will adjust to changes in their life and adapt to things. We might do a situational assessment at the end to test out some of the things before we do a planning meeting, just to see whether our thoughts about what we've seen can be translated into something in a particular workplace. And then we do a lot of interviews with family members, with neighbors, with friends, with agency providers, with service coordinators, with everybody, the whole spectrum of people, so that we're getting as much information as we can. And that all gets put together, and it's like a puzzle piece that you're putting it all together. And while you're doing that process, you're really trying to not have assumptions about what you're going to find out. You're not trying to sort of evaluate what can this person do. You're trying to see what they do and what their life is like. And it really works. That's what's amazing about it. It feels like, oh, this is kind of a mushy thing. We're just going out and finding out about people. But when you do it in a structured way, a picture really emerges that helps for employment. And it's all geared to employment. So we have a vocational profile, and we'll just kind of go through a little bit about the vocational profile, and then we'll break. The vocational profile is a comprehensive 3-part document, and it guides you through the process, so you don't have to fill it out at the time, but it helps you see these are the areas that really do relate to employment. So you'll look at a volunteer's site, and you'll paint a picture of what they're actually doing on that volunteer site. You'll paint a picture of the personality things that come out on that, of the attributes you see. If somebody is on a volunteer site and they're always going up to their boss and or the person there and saying, "How can I help?" You've learned something very valuable from that. So in the profile, again, the goal is to state not what the person can do, but to see what they're doing. And the reason you don't want to make assumptions about what they can do is, remember, at the other end, we're going to be talking to employers, and we're going to have to match what we've seen with something that we don't know is there yet, because we're looking at employers' unmet needs. So if we try to make conclusions too quickly, first of all, we're going to close out possibilities, and we're going to be seeing things through a lens that we shouldn't be looking at, because we don't, especially in this kind of economy that we have now. There are so many different kinds of employers. Everything's so diverse. You have no idea where you're going to find a task until you go. And then at the planning meeting, we're going to make guesses about what kind of employer might have those needs. But you want to be as non-evaluative as possible, so going in the whole spectrum of things that you've seen the person do. So we have 3 parts. There's a part that just is like an interview intake form with basic information. And the basic information is important because it's going to help you decide which direction your discovery is going to go. So it's going to have basic information about what kind of volunteer work people have done in the past, what school they went to, what work experiences they have, so you have a place to start. Information about their neighborhood, so you know what the bus lines are. So some basic, who their family members are, so you know who you're going to want to talk to. So that's kind of like your little bare bones structure. The second part is the actual part 2, which is where you're collecting all of this information. And again, these profiles are on this website, so you can kind of look at them, and then you can sort of say, and there are models that even actually show you each part, what you're supposed to put in. So again, it's great to have a training, but it's all there. So that's the discovery part 2. And the part 3 is the part where you're beginning to make conclusions. You're translating everything you learn into what you know about the economy and employers in preparation for your planning meeting. In that portion, you're going to write up the conditions for success, what kind of environment the person needs, and that's where you get into the issues of people with dual diagnosis or a lot of physical issues, or somebody who has communication issues, you're going to sort of say, okay, what environment do they need? Maybe if somebody has some issues with communication, it's the kind of environment they need that will make the difference. Maybe there are natural supports that are really going to be effective. If somebody has some psychiatric issues, the particular kind of environment, the number of hours, all of those things can be very, very important. Or the conditions may have to do with job coaching and the kind of support that they need. This is complete. You complete this prior to the customized planning meeting, and then you're ready for the planning meeting. I am going to just say 2 words about the meeting, and then we'll give everybody a break, and then we'll come back and we'll go into what I'm going to talk about in the second session. Is I'm going to talk about talking to employers and the planning meeting in more detail, and then what I'd like to do is and give you some chance to ask some questions, and then what I want to do is talk a little bit about why it worked for us, why it wasn't just something that worked with a few people, but how we could actually make it work sort of on a ground level, and then talk a little bit about internships. And I think we can fit it all in. So just a little bit about the planning meeting. That planning meeting is like this most amazing, wonderful meeting. It is the individuals there, the people who they care about are there. I have never seen someone come out of a planning meeting without feeling like they can work and that they're excited about working and feel positive about themselves in ways that very often people with disabilities aren't given the opportunity to feel. It gets everyone on the same page, and it's a lot of fun. So hopefully when we come back, we'll talk a little more about that.